What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek. This week, we are talking about the Memorial Tournament presented by Workday at Muirfield Village. So one of the bigger, better events, kind of up there with Bay Hill. Obviously not quite there with the majors, but it's one of the best fields, best courses on the PGA Tour every year. So took a couple week hiatus after the PGA Championship. So excited to kind of get back into the podcast realm this week. With that being said, a couple housekeeping notes. So we'll probably be posting, so keep a look at it. If you're interested, you can already DM me. A couple have, and I have a couple open lines of communication that I need to close the loop on anyways. But we'll be opening probably 4 or 5 job recs for content creators for Fantasy Golf Bag. So if you have any interest in using our data, talking about betting or DFS, or just, if you're just interested in certain unique player data, kind of the sky's the limit, honestly. We're very flexible. You've seen through some of our blog posts, like we've touched on Apex, we've touched on course fit stuff. And so keep a lookout for that. If you are interested, go ahead and send me a DM on X or in Discord, if you're in our Discord. So that's exciting to start to expand a little bit of the content from, several years ago with Sky and Axis helping quite a bit. And I think now we can start to unroll a little bit more with some more content from other creators and kind of touch more bases each week, which should be exciting. With that being said, obviously this podcast is not, there's no promotions, no promos besides fantasygolfbag.com. So all I ask is, obviously if you want to check out the site, I highly encourage it. There's a lot of good data. Some of it, as I've gotten feedback, is like, there's a lot of questions around, why is this important, or what should I be looking at every week? And there's a few videos and tutorials out on the site already, obviously, to kind of guide your way from a generic kind of evergreen standpoint. So you can do that. Obviously, sign up at fantasygolfbag.com, or also leave a rating and a review on Spotify, YouTube, etc. A like on YouTube, whatever. That always helps the show and helps out Fantasy Golf Bag and myself as we kind of progress and grow. And as you'll see here, we already have, I'll take this banner off right here. You can kind of see up here at the top. So every week, as of now, in LineupIQ, we carry all the slates. So if like LPGA is your jam, you can obviously play, you can build lineups and simulate for the LPGA, DP World Tour, etc. But you can see now we have the Korn Ferry Tour loaded each week. You can see those fields in FGB Studio, player profiles, tee times, course summary data is in the works, but you can kind of see stuff depending if they've moved courses over the last couple of seasons. And then Live Golf is still the status quo we've had for the last couple of years. So now Korn Ferry is pretty interesting. And as we add in more data, it'll be a little bit better from a betting standpoint. Not many people carry that. There can be some nice edges, especially in matchups when the markets swing a little bit too fast, too soon. So Memorial this week, we can go ahead and jump into it. I think that was really all the housekeeping notes. No big updates in LineupIQ. Obviously, we have other sports now. We have tennis and MMA. FGB Studio, no real changes that I can think of top of my head. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into some talk about Memorial. As you know, we'll come at this from a little bit of a different angle, trying to clear out any kind of misconceptions, I guess, when people look at golf data. So if you're new to the show, you'll be in for a treat, I think. Honestly, when we look at data from a golf, like when we look at the time machine, which we'll look at here in just a bit, but when players come to any event, if you think about like where all those players have been over the last couple weeks or last couple months, they've all played different events, different number of rounds. They've had different success, obviously, and now they all end up here at this event. And now it's our job to figure out what kind of profiles best sit for that golf course. And again, without going one by one or 1v1 for every single player, I prefer when we talk to people in DFS, obviously betting, this is going to be extremely applicable. But from a DFS perspective, the models that we build in FGB Studio should be almost from the mindset of a betting model. When you start to get too much of a niche statistics focus, you start to muddy the water. And even from a time frames perspective, which we talk about every week, you'll see players where if they had a good week, you could see like they had a good week because they've played well the last 2 events. But if you look at that same lens for all the players in the field, the last 2 weeks or last 4 weeks isn't exactly predictive for the entire field. A lot of times what you'll see is the last 6 to 12 months and sometimes even 2 years, depending on the strength of the field, is the more predictive timeframes from predicting an entire field for success. So like I said, you can take the data a lot of different ways. Bigger lens is the preferred method here. But honestly, looking through, even last week, you look through a couple players, they can come in with a hot streak. If you viewed every player in the same lens, it's going to be quite muddy. Vice versa, if you take just the last 2 years, you might miss some guys with some good recent form. So you want to kind of capture all of that, which is exactly what FGB Studio does, to weight, different time frames, different stats over those time frames. And then course summary is kind of what kind of puts the glue together for what you should be looking at. So with that being said, the first thing I want to look at is last year at Memorial at Muirfield Village. So let me take myself off here for a second. And I just want to talk through, the importance of statistics at a golf course, why it can be misleading, especially from a strokes gain perspective. So what we're going to do first is obviously Scotty won last year. This is the strokes gain from each player for the event. So you can see Scotty here off the tee, fantastic. Approach, really, really good, if not the best. Number 2. Okay, number 2 last year. Putting, he lost a little bit putting, interestingly enough. And then you can see his scorecards here, like through each round. Round 4, actually putted pretty well. Only hit 11 greens. Round 3, 13 greens. Round 2, 14 greens. Round 1, 12 greens. So the reason I bring this up, the first thing is if you go through this leaderboard and you're trying to think through, okay, what strokes gain statistics did well at this event, and can I use that this week? Let's go look at strokes gain off the tee. If you go look through this, just quickly sort who gained the most off the tee and how did they finish. You have Sepp Straka 3rd, Scotty Scheffler 1, Ben Griffin 2, a couple top 20s in there, Matty Schmid miscut, Sung J M T16. So it's okay. Like top of the board, sure. 1, 2, 3 are up there. If you look at approach, again, if you do really well in approach pretty much any given week, you're going to have a decent shot at finishing the top 10, if not winning, if other parts of your game are in check. Scotty Scheffler, number 2 there, finished first. Taylor Pendrith, T12. Akshay Bhatia, T16. Henley, T5. A couple middle finishes. Guys lost strokes around the green or putting, right? Like all that's part of golf. And you can look at putting, the best putters, Brandt Snedeker, T7, Sepp Straka 3rd, Nick Taylor 4th, on down the line. So why do I bring that up? Number 1 is off the tee can encapsulate a lot of things. One is that off the tee because of distance, or is that off the tee because of accuracy? Okay, that's kind of process number 1. Because off the tee on a golf course that's relatively wide open or a low penalty for missing the fairway, it could be distance all the way. Like off the tee could strictly be Bryson hitting it 340 on 12 of 14 tee shots. He gained a bunch of strokes off the tee because of the distance. On a course like this, off the tee a lot, if you look at traditional here for the driving accuracy, you'll see a lot of these guys at the top: Sepp Straka, Sung J M, Russell Henley, Brandt Snedeker, Harris English. We don't have Scotty in this first block of players, but you can see driving accuracy had a pretty good correlation with finish. Driving distance, you can see we have Ben Griffin 2nd. Everyone else, not great. We got a miscut, T16, T49, T25, T44, T20. So again, you could dive into this a lot of different ways, but the first thing is looking at the strokes gained. Is it just distance or is it accuracy? Obviously, both is a big plus, but you're trying to figure out what part of the off the tee calculation was like the factor in that metric. Approach just is approach. I mean, essentially hitting greens was the biggest factor. If you look through this, Shane Lowry was number one, finished T23. Then you have Nick Taylor fourth, Scotty first, Ben Griffin second. Sahith missed the cut. Sepp Straka third, Russell Henley fifth, Taylor Pendrith 12th, Ricky Fowler 7th. So like green regulation, not too surprising because that's pretty well consistent with approach numbers. But the point that I wanted to make really quickly is if you go to this leaderboard and you look at off the tee, you think, oh, okay, off the tee's a pretty big factor, but which part of that off the tee number? Because if you look at off the tee from the last couple of events, that could be off the tee at RBC Heritage, where distance isn't a factor. Hitting greens off of good tee shots is the factor for off the tee. Like if you're going to have better shots or not miss fairway, you're going to have a better off the tee number that week. So that's a calculation. If you go to Quail Hollow, off the tee is more distance related. So off the tee is not always apples to apples. And it's important to understand that as you go into a golf tournament. Approach is somewhat fluky in a sense if you think about how strokes gained approach is calculated from different lies. So, for example, you could have a guy that didn't hit a lot of fairways and gained a lot off the tee. Or, I'm sorry, gained a lot on approach, didn't hit a lot of fairways. And you can go down the leaderboard and look at that. So the point of this story is when we look at the lead-in stats for the course summary, you'll see that off the tee actually is not predictive for gaining a bunch of strokes off the tee at this course. Mainly because you can gain it because you're long off the tee, you hit more fairways this week, or you're shorter and you still hit more fairways this week. Either way, off the tee is a big factor, but how you get there can be done through distance and fairways, or just fairways, moderate distance. We can look through the driving distance again there. For guys that finish well, you'll see the board all over the place, right? Scotty Scheffler averaged just under 300 yards. Ben Griffin 306. Okay. Sepp Straka 292. Nick Taylor 285. Russell Henley 283. So distance is not a part of that equation in off the tee. So keep that in mind as you kind of research this week for sure. I think driving accuracy is probably the bigger one. You can see, at least guys are above average, if not green at the top of the board. If you go all the way to the bottom of the worst players, you'll see, a little bit of red driving distance wise, but you saw that at the top of the leaderboard anyways. Driving accuracy was a big factor. I don't know what Aaron Rai was doing, but you can see, JJ Spahn did not drive the ball well. Sahith Theegala, notoriously bad driver, up there with Cameron Smith. And Joe Highsmith, the same thing. So you can see that trend from a field perspective of the driving distance versus driving accuracy. And then, like I said, green regulation is kind of like the holy grail. It's such a big stat and it's binary. So literally hitting the green tends to gain strokes on approach, especially on a difficult golf course like this. Missing the green is going to lose strokes on approach and you're not going to have a good week. So with that being said, you can go through any of these past events and look through it. You can look through Cantley's win and see the kind of the same stuff as well. So keep that in mind as we look through the course summary, which we'll do right now. So this event basically been played at Muirfield Village forever. This is Jack Nicklaus's tournament. In 2020, they played the COVID workday event. I can't remember what it was called. So that is in here if you want to look at it. It was much softer, and you can see that in some of the data. If you were to look through that, if you click 2020, you'll see some of the data for like accuracy was much higher. The 290 to 310 number was a little bit higher. So a little bit of a nuance there with 2020 conditions and how they were setting it up post-COVID. But let's talk about like the meat of the golf course, especially the last couple of years. So overall, Muirfield Village, a very difficult golf course. The return to par per player per round is plus 0.6 strokes over par. So a little bit more difficult than average here. These are the stat correlations down here at the bottom, which we'll get into in FGB Studio here in a second. Again, looking through different time frames, you can find a player coming in with good form over the last 8 weeks and have a good week. You can look through, the majority of our really strong correlations is 12 months and 9 months. 24 months kind of dips down. So really basically 9 months to a year. 6 months isn't too bad either. So 6 months to 12 months, we'll call it. Like I said, we'll get into this in FGB Studio, but you can quickly see here, like literally field adjusted strokes gained total. Who's the best players in the field? They do the best here. Makes sense. They're the best for a reason. Bogey or worse, which is their bogey avoidance number, very high as well. And then total strokes gained, tee to green, also field adjusted. Spectrum a little bit lower, which I found interesting. But you can go through each of these and look through the data and then apply it however you like. For example, I think in which one was it? Like in the 24-month time frame, bogey or worse, literally whoever makes the least amount of bogeys over the last 2 years is top of the board. I think birdie or better showed up somewhere in here. Maybe not. Maybe it was 9 months. Creeps in here and down at the bottom. But all to say, the big buckets of total strokes gained and tee to green, and then bogey or worse, which is a very predictive stat, especially on a difficult golf course, which is somewhat logical there. For the course profile, you can see the driving accuracy, 61.8%. Driving distance, just under the tour average of 302. So again, the dynamic there is really driving accuracy over distance. You can see how guys prioritize hitting fairways here versus missing the rough. With the rough being cut at 4 inches, you don't want to be missing too many fairways and having to hit those approach shots, which tend to be longer here. And it honestly inflates the distance from your approach shots anyways, because if you're missing fairways, that's going to cut down on whatever role the fairways have for those tee shots. You're going to have an extra 20 yards of a longer approach shot anyways. So fairways here is a very big deal. You can see here the distance penalty is also high. So there's a combination of not dinking it out there to hit the fairway. You're going to suffer in the long term. Missed fairway penalty at almost half a shot is a big deal. So those are the big buckets for driving. When we look at approach, this is kind of a cluttered chart. So I'll go down here to the bottom really quickly. Very well spread out, right? 200 plus, 30% of approach shots, 175 to 200, all the way down to 125 to 150, all kind of in that 15% range. And then 50 to 125, a lot of guys have layups into the par fives, and they're going to have those wedge shots in. So a very broad look at players this week is what fits best, which I like to see, honestly. It kind of gets you set up for the US Open coming up here soon in 2 weeks. So as far as other interesting data, the driver profile here on the left-hand side, this is the last 5 years. So 2021 through 2025, you can see it's leaning towards balanced. You can click through each year. This is lead-in form for each of those players in that leaderboard and how they finish, not just in the tournament. So like, for example, 2025, it leans strong accuracy. 2024 favors accuracy. 2023, it went all the way to strongly favors distance, which we could go back and look at that leaderboard in 2023 and look at like the guys at the top of the leaderboard and see the distance there are guys that are longer that did very well. Rory, Adam Scott, Fitzpatrick, Hatton, Wyndham Clark, all in the top 12. Scotty, Victor Hovland. Scotty's not known for his distance. Victor Hovland, a little bit. There's some shorter guys mixed in there. Denny McCarthy, which interestingly enough averaged over 300 yards here. So, and then 2022 back to accuracy, 2021 balance. So again, everything's kind of pointing to a balanced approach off the tee, leaning towards accuracy, if anything. At least from a strokes gained off the tee perspective, the accuracy standpoint is kind of like the tie break at least. These are the buckets for your tee shots, a lot from 290 to 310. So if you want to pull up driving IQ in FGB Studio, you could look at the 290 to 310 driving accuracy. That might be a good thing to peek at this week. 270, 290 as well. But 290 to 310 is kind of like, that's a big bucket with a lot of variance in the leaderboard. Let's see here. Yeah, a couple other like easy charts. Importance of hitting fairway. Yeah, very important. Importance of driving distance. Less important. Difficulty of hitting the fairway. Less important, or less difficult, I should say. And I think a lot of that's just mindset. Guys know that they're not going at it. Wyndham Clark's one of the longest guys on tour. He's not going to come here, at 100% trying to bomb it on every hole. There's a sense of some type of control to make sure you're hitting it out there and also finding the fairway to have your best chance for good approach shots. And then you can look at the similar courses for each of those. Interestingly enough, Sedgefield shows up multiple times, which I'm not sure how many guys here have that crossover over the last few years, but Sedgefield pops up twice in difficulty of hitting fairway and the importance of hitting a fairway. So Sedgefield Country Club there. Comp courses, we got Pebble Beach. Interestingly enough, it's a par 71, 7104, but we know how demanding, the green and regulation number is there and how important it is to hit the fairways and have, clean lies for your approach shots. Muirfield Village is obviously correlated because that's from 2020. It just shows up as a different course. And then TPC Twin Cities, which I wouldn't have thought about, but that is also highly correlated as far as the course comps go. So those are your top three. Technically top two because we would, logically throw out Muirfield Village because it is Muirfield Village. And then the last thing we'll look at here for the players that won their lead-in form for any of these time frames. We'll do a year. It's pretty good. So what kind of stands out, right? Off the tee, huge. All these guys were gaining strokes off the tee in the 12 months leading into that event. You could do 12 weeks. Most of these guys were. Billy Horschel was losing strokes off the tee, but mostly good off the tee, right? We'll go back to 1 year. Approach, same thing, besides Billy Horschel, kind of fluky in a sense, I guess. I'll try to be generous there in 2022. But all in all, off the tee, great. Approach, great. Goes back to our field-adjusted strokes gained tee to green. Around the green, pretty much pointless. Putting all over the place. And that gets us to the time machine really quickly. So when the time machine came out a couple years ago, this was our kind of easy way to kind of look through the field, kind of quickly look through the last, basically 3 or 4 months. I can't remember what this was. And figure out which stats kind of stand out over that time frame. So obviously approach is pretty big. Generally speaking, off the tee was good. Some guys that finished well were losing strokes off the tee, but all in all, tee to green, really positive. Whether it's off the tee approach, that is kind of the recipe for success here. Looking at birdie or better, not really great. Bogey or worse wasn't great either. I shouldn't say great. It's at least average or above average, right? Like your 2% less bogeys per round on average is better than the field. So just an easy way to do this. And the reason I bring this up is now you can do this in FGB Studio, which we'll go to now. And I already ran all these models. So you can go to, whenever you add in the Memorial Tournament for FGB Studio, just click Apply Template. You can apply the Memorial template, and this will already pre-populate all those timeframes we just looked at and all the stats that I'm weighting and pulling into each of these different models, different weights, different number of stats, etc. And that gets you this. So from a back testing perspective, which is what this is kind of evolved into from the time machine, you can go back to any of these events. So like 2024, we can go look at, we'll apply a template, and then we'll get into the top plays for this week. And I put a note in Discord, which we'll talk about briefly. So this was, I'd hate to victory lap, the Scotty Scheffler ever winning, right? Like he's going to be number one if he wins. It looks great. But looking through the top of these rankings, you got Scotty finished first, Xander 8th, Aberg 5th, Colin Morikawa 2nd, Hideki 8th. Some guys, I mean, not everybody can't finish in the top 10. And to perfectly predict the top 10 is next to impossible, which is kind of being, for lack of a better phrase, directionally accurate, where the best players in your model have the best aggregate finishes in the top 15 or top 20, hopefully some winners and top fives. And then if you go to the bottom, you have a bunch of miscuts and a lot of mediocre, meaningless finishes. You'll always catch some weird ones. Adam Hadwin finished 3rd, didn't look great. Matt Fitzpatrick finished 5th. It's kind of middle of the board there. So the goal here is to look back any of those stats, and I'll just show you a really easy way to do this. If you go to the standard model, if you go to the statistics groups on the left-hand side, go down to the bottom to time machine. You can do any of your time frames you want to choose, hit apply, and you can pull over. It's just a ton of data, but once you get used to this, it's pretty easy to navigate. But you can see each of these, you can do ranks and see how each of these guys finished and how their lead-in form looked from a time machine perspective. So like driving accuracy, you go sort on driving accuracy. You got Colin Morikawa second, miscut. So like just driving accuracy is not the ticket. Scotty Scheffler first, T20 for Fleetwood, T5 for Seb Straka. If you do driving distance, same thing. Not a lot of great finishes, to be honest, from a driving distance perspective. Aberg fifth, Tony Finau eighth. But you can go through every single one of those. Just those individual stats. Ideally, you go and weight these, which is what I already did in all those other time frames. But you can go through every single one of these. Green and regulation, how did that do? Okay, wow. If I just ran green and regulation for that time frame, I got T8. I have first place, T8, fifth place, second place, just off of green and regulation. So obviously that helps you with the back testing. Proximity, I hate, but you can look at it. You do have Scotty in there, number 3, and he won. Aberg fifth. Otherwise, you got miscut, T45, miscut, 43rd, 49th. It's very random for proximity. You can do bogey avoidance, looks really good. So like just off of this, like if you don't want to use our bigger buckets, you can go through the back testing using Time Machine and FGB Studio and say, all right, truthfully, if I just ran this on bogey avoidance and green and regulation, like that's huge. And you can even weight it and see like how good just those two did compared to those other models I just ran. So I'll take off procs. And now if you look at it, this is the model rankings for just green and regulation and bogey avoidance. So right there, you got 8th place, first place, 15th, 5th, T22, 5th place, 8th place, T20, 2nd place, T27. It makes it incredibly easy, very clear. And like I said, if you want to start to tinker with other things, tee to green I love, add tee to green in there, see if it bumps your number up. Strokes gained total is very predictive week in and week out. Using that helps out quite a bit. The only caveat I'll really mention with strokes gained total is when you look at our lead-in stat correlations, strokes gained total is always number one, or shouldn't say always number one, probably in the top 3. Adding in tee to green helps. That removes the putting variance, which most people hate. If you want to take out tee to green and just break off the tee and approach and make your own weights to each of those, certainly can do that as well. But a very easy way for you to kind of back test each of those, go to any of those prior years all the way back to 2014 and see how that model would have done year over year, right? Like last week, there was a lot of talk about the studs, I guess, relative to their performance in that type of event, not doing as well as they had in prior years. So every now and then you'll catch a weird year, but the goal is to model this out just like every other week and kind of create the best overall best model or combination of models for that given week. So honestly, I kind of am tempted to add in just green and regulation and bogey avoidance, and we can see if that back tests well for one other event. So let me save this. Update my models. And let's go to 2025 and take a peek. This is 2025. I'm going to apply my updated one really quickly. So this pulls in all the same time frames I just talked about. Let's go back to that standard one we just did with just green regulation and bogey avoidance. Both are equally weighted. You could shift that however you like. You can't see that because I'm blocking it right there on the left-hand side here. And you can see that still did really well. You got Scotty, like I said, I'm not going to victory lap Scotty winning because he's going to be first. And if he wins, it just looks like, everything worked out perfectly. But honestly, looking through the rest of this, it looks great. Ben Griffin second, Maverick Neely fifth, Henley fifth, Cantley and Harris English both finished 12th, Sepp Straka third. So let's pull that forward to 2026. I'm going to reapply so I can add that. Let's replace all those. So we got 6 models going now. We got 8 weeks, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 2 years. And then we just added that quick little green regulation and bogey avoidance one. And I just need to weight it a little bit. So let's just give it a little taste. Do some rankings. And this is what we get. So like I said, each one of these is individually weighted. They all have their own stats, and we just kind of tinker with this a little bit to add the greener regulation, which I do like. I think it's captured in a lot of different stats anyway, so there's probably an argument to be made for double counting, but for the sake of this demo and this week, that's a really good way to kind of do your own research and start to tinker with this with the time machine look back. So what does this give us? I'll do pricing. Let's see who kind of stands out. So no surprise, if you had a betting model and, for the favorites here, any of these looked way out of whack, then sure, you can maybe go to Polymarket or Kalshi and bet no on a win. I mean, it's going to be like 90% or 95%. It's not going to be a ton of EV there. But all in all, like if you see the top of DK pricing, the top of the odds, all these guys in your top 10 should be pretty close. Like there could be some shifts around where, right now we got 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 4, 8. So it's pretty close to perfectly lined up first place to 10th place in terms of ranks and their DK pricing. So nothing crazy there. What does that mean? I mean, honestly, all these guys are good plays. Your tie breaks are really course history or looking at the last 8 weeks if you want to weight that, or maybe you pull in something unique, like you want to pull driving IQ up, like we talked about 290 to 310 driving accuracy. So again, a lot of that stuff becomes a little bit more advanced, but it's worth the time investment to give you a little bit better, inclination of who you want to play and kind of break up this top group. But that's exactly how you would expect any of our betting models or anyone else that bets at a reasonable level. You should not see crazy out of whack lines where, if we went down here, we have some decent mid-price guys, which is nice to see, but we're not going to see Akshay Bhatia up here ahead of Rory McIlroy or Cameron Young. Something's probably off, or you're getting a little bit too cute. So this is a really good starting point. The top of the board here looks exactly how you would expect. Looks like almost the entire top 11 are in here. And then as we go down, you can start to make decisions, right? Let's see here. The other thing I wanted to bring up, which I don't know if I can share it since I'm sharing this, is in Discord. We have 3 different ways of showing the data. We can show the raw numbers. So like each of these show like their bogey avoidance, raw number, strokes gained off the tee, adjusted strokes gained total, tee to green, whatever. That's their raw number. You can look at their rank, like how does that rank? But as you know, if you've been doing this for a while, rank 1 to 2, is that really the same as, rank 15 to 16, or is it a lot closer? And typically it's a lot closer the further you go down. So we have percentiles. So you can see here, I'll go back to this one. If we do percentiles, you can see basically the top of the board, Scotty Scheffler, nearly 100% rating in every single stat category we looked at, going down into this kind of second top tier range in the 80th percentiles. But as you go down, you'll see all these guys are basically, 70th percentile to 50th percentile. There's 20 percentile points for like 40 guys. There's a lot. So these guys are all very, very close. So keep that in mind. For example, Nick Taylor here, 58, Maverick Neely, 57.9. That's going to show a different ranking. It will be, 22 to 23. But they're a lot closer in reality than just saying Nick Taylor's 22nd here, Matt Neely's 23rd. So I would encourage you guys to use the percentiles this week. It's very easy to do a filter on like the top half. You could do percentiles in the top 50. We could do that. And then just favorite those players. You got 37. Apply that to LineupIQ for your player pool, and off you go. So you can start there. But to finish off, like talking through like the top guys, I'll do rankings to kind of simplify it a little bit. I don't really have any hot takes for any of these guys at the top. I think the biggest question mark is salary usage. Rory is quite expensive in this field. 11.5. Scotty Scheffler, an extra 2,000 more, is quite expensive. You guys have heard this a ton from me at least, but you know, $2,000 from 11.5 to Scotty, that's literally a guy that's 6,500, and now you can play an $8,500 guy. So there's huge amounts of opportunity cost for Scotty's price at 13.5 this week. We've seen that the last couple months, if not the last couple years. So I think the salary usage is probably the question mark. I would probably just play all these guys, or at least include them in my player pool, run LineupIQ, see where the ownership shakes out and which guys are getting spit above the field more than not. I haven't run the ownership yet, so I don't have that up in LineupIQ, but it'll be up tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning. That is where I think the tie breaks go. And I think that helps from a mental aspect. I think there's less of a like conscious selection. Like you're actually using some type of math basis to say, you know, Cameron Young at 10.3, even though him and Rory are quite close, that price tag difference, even though it's only $800, you know, that could be like a 20% ownership difference in what you want to have exposure to versus Rory. So keep that in mind as you go down. All these guys are very highly priced. I would not be surprised if you have a really spread out share of, let's say, 6 or 7 of these guys, and then the rest of this is all just mid-price guys that maybe you're double the field on. So who are the guys that should be double the field on, or at least that grade out the best? JJ Spawn looks really good. He's 10th here. Alex Smalley playing fantastic. He's only 8K. Like his game quite a bit. That's special model we just made at the end there, standard 6. We can just rename that to special model. And that is, resort this. You can see him down here, 5th in that model. So doing really well in that time machine back test. Last 8 weeks, great. Last 9 months, great. Alex Smalley looks like probably going to be pretty chalky, but he should be at 8K with as good as he's been playing in big events too. I mean, honestly, playing good courses, good events, playing well. Jordan Spieth, a little bit questionable there, especially as his form has dipped over the last 8 weeks. Justin Rose, kind of the same boat. Kurt Kitayama, but Nikolai Hogard looks really good. So 7,700 Nikolai Hogard. Sepp Straka is interesting as a bounce back. He should be much lower owned. He was getting hyped up there right before the PGA Championship. So I would like to kind of jump back in early on Sepp Straka here. Jake Knapp, we'll see. His injury seems severe. It's severe at least enough to withdraw from 2 or 3 events in a row. If not 4. I can't remember how many events he's withdrawn from now, but I probably just wait. 7,600. I don't know. We'll see what the ownership looks like with where his odds are and stuff like that and what his line movement does. But I feel like if anybody coming off of the AWD is kind of like questionable, coming off 3 or 4, I don't want to say scares me off, but definitely hesitate to click that button. Shane Lowry looks okay. Aaron Rye going down a little bit further. Gary Woodland looks fantastic. You can look what his course history has been here. So kind of all over the place. We got a T4, T5, some T25s, and then some missed cuts in there when he was playing pretty poorly. So yeah, I would jump right back into Gary Woodland here. Same with Wyndham Clark, 7,300. Seems like a misprice, to be honest. Mac Meissner playing really well of late, 7,100, a good value there. Corey Connors is interesting. What is his deal? What's going on here? So yeah, we have it on strokes gained. There's his spectrum numbers. He just has not been the same Corey Connors this year as he was last year and the year before. So, yeah, not the best course history either. So maybe Corey Connors is a skip this week. Christopher Reed looks pretty good. Keegan as well. Honestly, Keegan's been up and down all year. You can see that in his results. You know, started off the year poorly, had some decent top finishes. And again, he's only 7,000. This is probably a decent course for him to have a good bounce back spot. You can see his ownership has been pretty low all year too. So no concerns with him being chalky. No surprise there. Very mixed course history. Alex Fitzpatrick, 6,700. No reason not to stay on there. Eric Cole, I would skip, even despite his good showing last week. His off the tee numbers have been so bad. Now, we bet him last week for a couple of different reasons, and it wasn't really because of his off the tee number or his like the course fit of removing off the tee numbers. It was just a matter of like his pricing was at the right spot. He was showing signs in other areas. And if like he neutralizes off the tee a little bit, he would be in good shape. I think this is a bigger golf course where his penalty off the tee is going to be more dramatic. I would not go back to Eric Cole this week at 6,700. Plenty of other good options down here, but I would skip that one. Let's see. Bud Cauley looks pretty good. Brian Harman, I'm curious about his course history. You don't think about Brian Harman on a long, tough golf course, I guess. And for good reason. He's got a bunch of missed cuts here. So, yeah, I would definitely lean into the course history bit for a guy like Brian Harman, where you would think, like, okay, well, he's going to hit some more fairways, possibly. But the rest of his game has just not been there. So, yeah, Brian Harman will X out as well. I kind of skipped over Nick Taylor. He's been very consistent. Not sure if consistent is what we really need in this type of event with 72 players, but still a good play and has shown upside in a couple rounds at least. If we go down to the bottom here to round details, you can see some really good spike rounds. Off the tee, kind of mediocre. Approach, up and down. I'm not worried about around the green or putting, but you can see like he's had some good pops in a couple random events. So Nick Taylor, worth a shot this week. And then outside of that, not really anybody interesting. And I mean, we did see like, as you go down to the bottom here, there's going to be one or two guys that pops. Finding that guy is next to impossible, but there's ways you can get creative. And if you want to play them in your player pool, let's say like 5 of these guys, and for lack of a better term, get lucky. That is certainly something you could try to do. Brant Snedeker would probably be one of those clicks. Approach has been fantastic. Off the tee, questionable. Even at this golf course, I'm not sure what's going on. So yeah, that his finish here, even that finish looks questionable, gaining 7 strokes putting. So I probably personally don't go to anybody under 6,500. I'll stop at Bud Cauley, and that'll be about it. Anybody that's played like super good, let's just quickly look at. Tell you what we'll do. We'll go look at Spectrum just last week for because most of those cheap guys, they're not going to be playing every week. So let's go down to the last one event, ball striking. And let's just see if anybody looks intriguing. Tom Hoagie, Sungjae sucks. Andrew Novak, okay. So Hoagie, Novak, Michael Kim, Billy Horschel, and Sahith. They're a little bit more expensive, but let's just check these guys. Novak and Tom Hoagie. Let's go back to FGB Studio. Let's refresh. I'm not going to waste time to refresh. They're right here. So they got Tom Hoge, Michael Kim, who was that? Sung J M, and who was the last one? Andrew Novak. Did I already click Novak? No, right here. So yeah, I mean, I would go through each of those guys. Those are probably the clickable guys, just to see if there's any spike of life in their spectrum number. So you can see there for like Sung Jae, he lost 6 strokes on approach. If you go to spectrum, he lost 4 strokes on approach. Not great. Let's go to Andrew Novak. Quite a bit better. Not a great finish. He lost 6 strokes putting. I think Novak's probably worth a shot. We'll give him a nod. Let's see. Tom Hoge as well. We'll take a peek. Really good on the approach numbers in spectrum. Like really, really good. A good finish last year, but otherwise not great. But for a shot in the dark, I think Hoagie's fine. And then the last one is Michael Kim, and then we'll close out this show. Yeah, Michael Kim in spectrum is looking really good. Off the tee, solid. Approach, really good. Not great history here. I still would probably give a shot on recent form over course history for the cheap guys. The expensive guys is a little bit different story because they're consistent year to year for the most part. The course history means a little bit more. But yeah, I would certainly take a shot on Novak and Michael Kim as those cheap guys. With that being said, I think that is it. I'm sorry I didn't talk about too much of the top guys. Honestly, there's not much to be said besides like looking through the course history of I'll go look at the tee times. For these guys, here's the best. So Scotty, Cantlay, Aberg, Rory. I mean, all these guys have good course history, relatively good course history, and good form coming in. So like I said, there's just the splitting hairs is probably me just putting it into LineupIQ. Where the ownership shakes out is letting that simulation do the work. Otherwise, all these guys have upside. I 1-to-1, it would be a very difficult discussion. I mean, Cameron Young over Aberg, probably, but by how much? And are you willing to exclude Aberg to have more shares of Young, or maybe spread it out? The pricing there isn't even a big deal. It's just literally the exposure. So interesting discussions to have later this week. And like I said, the plenty of values in that, low 8s to high 7s, mid 7s. So plenty to choose from. Let's quickly look at weather. Maybe not much to talk about. Looks pretty good on Thursday. Max of 10 in the afternoon. Really calm in the morning. Not too concerning. I mean, AM preferably for showdown, sure. Friday, a lot windier. I should say, a lot windier than Thursday, but very reasonable. We're talking about 10 to 15 miles per hour all day. So no real concern from a weather standpoint. All right. I think that'll do it, guys. As always, appreciate the support. You can check us out at fantasygolfbag.com. Leave a like, a review, a comment, whatever you want to do. DM me and keep a lookout for some content job recs that'll be on the horizon here soon. As always, best of luck this week. Reach out with any questions, and we will talk to you guys later. See ya.